What is happening here?
It was red wine. Her hair was drenched. The restaurant was upscale, and Sienna Ravel knew who had done it. Scarlett, her twin sister, her enemy. The blind date was a trap, her dress intentional, just to go sheer and make the humiliation worse. But someone saw. Johan Kalana, Mafia Don, at the next table. Cold eyes, but furious, because he recognized cruelty as an expert. And there, something in him broke, and he decided this woman deserved protection. And the worst night of her life had just become the most dangerous, because Johan Kalana never did anything without a reason, and she was the reason. Hi, my name is Lena, and I own this channel. Yes, I understand you guys don't really like these comments I make throughout the video, but they're important so YouTube doesn't take down my channel. That's why today my special shout out goes to Jean and B. Thanks for the support, you guys. And tell me something. Do you think an arranged marriage can work out? Or will there never be love in that relationship? Answer down in the comments. Chapter 1. Spilled Wine in the Don's Gaze.
Stay, don't look away.
The La Rosa Nera restaurant was exactly the kind of place I shouldn't be, with its Italian marble tables and crystal chandeliers that turned every movement into a performance under spotlights. I adjusted my dress for the third time, feeling the fabric too light against my skin, and wondered why I had agreed to that damn blind date. It'll be perfect, Sienna. He's a lawyer, gorgeous, you'll love him. Mila's excited voice still echoed in my head like a scratched record. She had practically dragged me into accepting, and I, like an optimistic idiot, had given in to the pressure and the pathetic hope that maybe something good could happen. I hate blind dates, always have, but I was trying because 5 years alone was too long for anyone, and each night I came back to the empty apartment in Brooklyn Heights. The silence weighed a little heavier on my shoulders. Fidgeting with the linen napkin, I watched the couples around me talking with that irritating ease, and wondered if loneliness wasn't better than the anxiety gnawing at my stomach in that moment. That's when I saw her, and my heart plummeted. Scarlett crossed the main hall with that calculated walk I knew so well, each step measured as if she were strutting down an invisible runway, and when her eyes met mine for a fraction of a second, a cruel smile curved her perfectly red-painted lips. We were identical, Scarlett and I. At least that's what everyone said. But I always knew there was something fundamentally different between us that went far beyond physical appearance. She had the same wavy brown hair, the same green eyes, the same height, but where my eyes reflected exhaustion and an attempt at healing, hers shone with something cold and calculating that sent shivers down my spine. On the other side of the hall, at a strategically positioned corner table, Johan Kalana watched the scene unfold with eyes trained to catch every detail, every micro-expression that revealed true intentions. He saw the woman identical to the one sitting alone approach, saw the venomous smile, saw the way she looked at her sister before acting. Scarlett watched Sienna sitting there, waiting like an idiot for a date that would never come, and familiar envy burned through her veins like acid. Always gets everything, she thought with growing resentment. Dates, work, happiness, but not today. Today I'm going to ruin it all. I saw everything happen as if time had deliberately slowed down to make my humiliation even more cinematic. The waiter passed beside Scarlett with a tray full of red wine glasses, and she faked a stumble so convincing that even I almost believed it, her body tilting to the exact side while her hands pushed the tray with force disguised as accident. The red wine spread through the air in an almost beautiful arc, before crashing over me like a cold and sticky waterfall, drenching my hair, running down my face, staining the light beige dress that now clung to my skin in an absolutely obscene way. The cold of the liquid made me gasp, and the scream left my throat before I could contain it. What? My voice echoed through the entire restaurant, breaking the sophisticated silence that had existed seconds before, and every person stopped eating, drinking, breathing, to watch my public embarrassment, as if I were the main attraction of some perverse reality show. Oh my God, Sienna! Scarlett's voice pierced the air with horror so fake it physically hurt to hear it. Sorry, I tripped. I didn't see. She approached with exaggerated gestures, grabbing napkins and trying to clean the wine from my hair in a way that only managed to spread the mess even more, rubbing the liquid against my scalp with unnecessary pressure. The entire restaurant watched us in awkward silence, and I felt the air conditioning against the wet fabric, realizing with growing horror that the dress was completely sheer now, stuck to every curve of my body like a translucent second skin. I crossed my arms over my chest instinctively, trying to preserve some remnant of dignity while wine dripped from my hair, forming a puddle around my feet. I looked at Scarlett, through the drenched strands falling over my face, and that's when I saw it, in that brief moment when our faces were too close for anyone else to notice. Pure satisfaction shone in her green eyes, identical to mine but completely empty of any humanity or regret, and a microscopic smile curved the corner of her mouth before she returned to the mask of sisterly concern. Scarlett. My voice came out calmer than I expected, every muscle in my body tense with contained rage. You did it on purpose. It wasn't a question. It was a statement based on 27 years of experience dealing with my twin sister's creative cruelty. She leaned even closer, her mouth almost touching my ear as she whispered words only I could hear. Proved it. Venom dripped from every syllable. Now your perfect date will see you like this. Ruined, as you always should be. She paused, her eyes deliberately dropping. By the way, look down. It's see-through. And then she simply left, her high heels clicking against the marble floor in a triumphant cadence as she left me there alone, drenched, humiliated, and exposed for the entire restaurant to see. Tears burned in my eyes, but I absolutely refused to let them fall, because Scarlett didn't deserve to have that complete victory over me, not after everything she had already done over the years. Desperately rummaging through my purse, I searched for the cardigan I was sure I had put in there before leaving home, my fingers trembling. I don't know if from anger or shame or cold, as I tried to hide with my arms firmly crossed over my chest. At the corner table, Johann Colonna watched everything with eyes that had seen too much cruelty throughout his life, not to recognize it instantly when it appeared disguised as an accident. Michael, his right-hand man sitting beside him, leaned in slightly and murmured low enough for only Johann to hear. "Boss, that was intentional," Johann interrupted with an icy voice, his eyes never straying from the wine-drenched woman desperately trying to preserve some dignity. "I saw it." The sister looked at her before tripping, calculated the angle, the timing, every movement. He paused, recognizing the cruelty with the dark familiarity of someone who understood deeply how cruelty worked. "I recognize it." Michael waited, knowing the boss well enough to know that more words would come eventually. "What do we do?" Johann stood up in a fluid movement, adjusting his suit cuffs with automatic precision. "I help." The statement was simple, definitive, with no room for debate or questioning. He crossed the hall toward the woman who hadn't cried despite the public humiliation, who kept her shoulders straight, even drenched in wine, and something in that silent strength awakened his interest in a way he couldn't fully name. I was still frantically rummaging through my purse when I felt a presence approach, and before I could lift my head or process what was happening, the warm and comforting weight of a men's jacket was placed over my shoulders. The expensive fabric wrapped around my body completely, and firm hands adjusted the jacket to cover the front of my transparent dress, while a deep voice spoke above my head. I noticed he refused to look directly at me, keeping his eyes deliberately averted in a gesture of respect that surprised me, considering literally everyone in the restaurant had stared at me as if I were a car crash they couldn't look away from. The smell of the jacket was woody and masculine, and the residual warmth from his skin embedded in the fabric made me realize how much I was shaking. "May I sit?" The voice was deep, slightly husky, with an accent suggesting Italian origins and a sarcastic irony that cut through the air. "Or would you prefer to keep drowning in Merlot?" I slowly lifted my head, following the line of the perfectly cut suit and fabric that probably cost more than my monthly rent, past the broad chest and wide shoulders, until finally finding the face of the man who had come to my aid, and my stomach contracted in a way that had nothing to do with anxiety. He was handsome in a dangerous way, the kind of masculine beauty that came accompanied by warnings in blinking red letters, with dark hair combed back revealing features that seemed sculpted by some Renaissance artist obsessed with perfection. But it was the eyes that held me completely, gray like a storm forming on the horizon, cold and calculating, but with something burning behind that icy surface. "Who are you?" The words came out before my brain could filter them, and I cringed internally at the abrupt way of asking, but he just smiled sideways, a small and sarcastically amused curve of his lips that made something strange happen in my chest. "Someone who saw the accident." He made air quotes when saying the word, making it clear he hadn't been fooled by Scarlett's performance, and knows it wasn't. A deliberate pause, eyes studying my face with an intensity that made me feel exposed in a different way. "Johann Colonna. And you?" "Sienna Ravel." I pulled his jacket tighter, feeling the residual warmth, and tried to ignore my heart beating too fast. And you saw that she did it on purpose? Johann sat in the chair across from me without waiting for permission, the fluid movement of someone accustomed to taking what he wanted without asking permission, and his eyes never left mine. I saw. The confirmation was simple. Direct. Sister? Twin? By the identical looks, I imagine. The surprise must have been obvious on my face because he smiled again, in that sarcastic way that suggested very little could truly surprise him. I nodded slowly, still processing that this stranger had not only seen through the farce, but had already deduced our relationship in seconds. Yes, twin. My voice came out tired with the weight of that poisonous history. And how do you know it was intentional? Most people would have believed the accident. Johann leaned back with casual elegance, his fingers drumming once against the table before becoming still. I recognize cruelty professionally. The answer came with a sarcastic tone, but there was something dark in the words. And she's poisonous. I saw it in her eyes before the trip. She calculated the angle, the timing, everything. A shiver ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold wine, and I found myself studying Johann with the same intensity he was studying me, trying to figure out who this man was, who recognized cruelty professionally and sat in La Rosa Nera as if he owned the place. Why does she hate you? The question came with genuine curiosity, without judgment, just direct interest, and something in that tone made me want to respond with the naked truth instead of the polished half-truths I normally used. Because I exist. The words came out bitter, loaded with 27 years of systemic envy, and she never accepted being second at anything, even though we're identical. I paused, biting my lip while deciding how much to reveal. Our parents always loved me more, or at least that's what she always believed, and after they died 5 years ago, the envy only got worse. Johann watched me in silence for a moment that seemed eternal, those gray eyes traveling over my face as if memorizing every detail, every expression, every micro-movement I made without realizing. You're not identical. I blinked, confused. What do you mean? We're identical twins. Your hair is shorter, he interrupted me, tilting his head while continuing that meticulous visual inventory. And curlier. She didn't have that. And you smile from the corner of your mouth, right side, differently from her. My heart gave an impossible jump at the observation that he had noticed such minuscule details in minutes, and I unconsciously touched the corner of my mouth, as if I could physically feel the difference. You're very observant. The sentence came out almost like an accusation, loaded with distrust and fascination. The occupation requires it. Johann responded with sharp sarcasm, but didn't elaborate on which occupation required such sharp observation skills. And your date? The lawyer? Where is he? The mention of the date made me laugh, a bitter sound without humor. Probably saw this. I gestured to my drenched hair and the jacket wrapped around my body, and ran. I don't blame him. Johann stood up in a fluid movement and extended his hand with an expression that was half command, half invitation. Come. Women's bathroom, 2nd floor, private. You clean up. It's better than staying here being watched like a zoo animal. I looked at the extended hand, so large it would probably engulf mine completely, and my brain started screaming warnings about accepting help from dangerously handsome strangers. Why should I go? I don't even know you. True, he didn't seem offended, just continued with his hand extended and unwavering expression. But I help you, or you stay smelling like wine being tonight's entertainment. Choose. I sighed, weighing pathetic options and reaching the inevitable conclusion that sitting there drenched was objectively worse than accepting help from a stranger who had at least been kind enough to offer his jacket. Okay, thank you. I placed my hand in his, and the warmth of his skin sent an unexpected electric current up my arm that made me swallow hard. Johann gently pulled to help me stand, and then his hand moved to my back in a protective gesture that seemed too natural considering we'd known each other for less than 10 minutes. He guided me through the restaurant with a confidence that made people automatically move aside, and I found myself hyper-aware of the warmth of his palm against my back through the jacket, of the woody scent emanating from him, of the way everyone looked at us with curiosity and something that seemed suspiciously close to reverent fear. I already hate pranks in general, and this one was in really bad taste. Chapter 2: Cleaning Up and Fascination.
I'm not afraid of you.
The private bathroom on the 2nd floor of La Rosa Nera was absurdly luxurious, with marble on the walls that reflected the golden light from crystal fixtures and a soaking tub that seemed to have been carved directly from a single stone. Johann opened the door with a key he pulled from the inside pocket of his suit, and the casual gesture made me realize that this space wasn't accessible to the restaurant's regular customers. He entered before me, grabbed soft towels stacked on a glass shelf, and placed expensive brand shampoo and conditioner I could never afford on the black marble counter. Shower there. He pointed to the transparent glass enclosure in the corner. Clothes. I'll have them brought. Size? The question caught me off guard, and I blinked confused while processing the impossible offer. You have clothes? Women's? Here? My voice came out higher than I intended. loaded with disbelief and instinctive suspicion about why exactly a man would have easy access to women's clothes in a restaurant. Johann looked at me with that sarcastic expression I was starting to recognize as standard. One eyebrow arched and the corner of his mouth curved in a half-smile that suggested he found my confusion amusing. I own the restaurant, and the hotel above. The revelation came casually, as if owning multi-million-dollar properties was as common as having a car. So yes, I have access to clothes. Size? My brain took a few seconds to fully process that I was accepting help, not just from a dangerously attractive stranger, but from a stranger who apparently owned this entire sophisticated establishment. Small, I finally answered, my voice coming out weaker as the reality of the situation began to sink in. And thank you, seriously. This is above and beyond. It's not. Johann interrupted my thanks with a firmness that didn't accept debate. It's basic decency, something your sister clearly doesn't have. He paused, gray eyes studying my face for a moment that seemed to stretch too long. Now go, clean up. I'll wait outside. I won't come in or invade your privacy. The specific guarantee about privacy made me relax muscles I didn't even know I had tensed, and I nodded as Johann left the bathroom, closing the door behind him with a soft click. I stood there for a few seconds just breathing, trying to process the last 20 minutes of my life that had gone from hopeful blind date to public humiliation to unexpected help from a stranger who owned entire restaurants. The shower was hot and strong, and when the water began washing the sticky wine from my hair, I felt something loosen in my chest, as if I were washing away not just the physical humiliation, but also the emotional weight of yet another sabotage by Scarlett. The shampoo smelled like lavender and something citrusy, and it was so different from the cheap product I used at home that I almost laughed at the irony of taking a luxury shower after the worst night of my life. 20 minutes later, I stepped out of the shower wrapped in a towel that was softer than anything I owned, and found a simple black dress hanging on the door on a padded hanger. The fabric was light, but of obvious quality, and when I put it on, I discovered it fell perfectly on my body, as if it had been custom-made, ending just above the knees in an elegant line that was sophisticated without being provocative. I dried my hair with the towel as best I could, letting the natural curls fall loose over my shoulders, and looked at my reflection in the mirror, trying to recognize the woman staring back at me, without wine-smeared makeup, without a transparent dress stuck to my body, without the expression of humiliation that had dominated my face in the main hall. I looked almost normal. Almost like the Sienna who existed before Scarlett decided to ruin my night. I took a deep breath, adjusted the dress one last time, and opened the bathroom door, finding Johann leaning against the opposite wall, with a relaxed posture that contrasted with the intensity of the look he fixed on me as soon as I appeared. Something changed in his expression when he saw me, a spark that passed too quickly through the gray eyes for me to fully identify, but which made my stomach do a strange flip anyway. Better? The question came accompanied by that slightly sarcastic tone, but there was genuine warmth behind the words that softened the sharp edges. Much better, thank you, I answered honestly, touching my damp hair unconsciously. And my date, the lawyer who was supposed to be here, did he really disappear, or is there still pathetic hope he'll show up? Johann pushed off the wall with a fluid movement, and for a second, he was too close, near enough for me to feel the heat emanating from him, and realize he was tall enough to make me tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. Called while you were in there, canceled claiming emergency. His voice had acquired a cutting edge of contempt. Obvious lie? He saw the wine and ran like the coward he is. I laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the empty hallway, and shook my head with the tired familiarity of yet another romantic disappointment added to the growing collection. Of course, typical. Men tend to run when things get even minimally complicated or embarrassing. It wasn't fair to generalize. I knew that rationally, but after 5 years of disastrous dates and relationships that never took off, bitterness had become my constant companion. Some men, Johann corrected with a firmness that didn't accept my generalization, eyes fixed on mine with an intensity that made me swallow hard. I didn't run. I stayed, and I'm still here. The simple statement carried weight I didn't know how to fully interpret, especially coming from a man I'd known for less than an hour. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words died in my throat when I realized I didn't know exactly what to say, so I just nodded and looked away, because maintaining eye contact with Johann Colonna for prolonged periods was starting to do strange things to my ability to think clearly. So I'll go now. I've disrupted your night enough already. I started moving away toward the stairs that would lead back to the main hall, but his voice stopped me before I could take more than 2 steps. You didn't disrupt anything. Actually, you considerably improved my night. Johann spoke with honesty, so direct it made me turn to face him again. Dining alone is boring, and you already lost your date anyway. He paused, and something that looked almost like vulnerability passed quickly through his expression, before being replaced by determination. Have dinner with me? Private table on the terrace. I'll make up for the lost date and the wine in your hair. My heart accelerated in an absolutely inappropriate way considering the offer was just dinner, but there was something in the way he looked at me, in the intensity contained in each word, that transformed the simple invitation into something that felt infinitely more significant. I should refuse. Every rational fiber of my being screamed that accepting dinner with a stranger who owned restaurants and recognized cruelty professionally was potentially dangerous. But the loneliness that had haunted me for the last 5 years weighed on my shoulders, and the way Johan had defended me without even knowing me, how he had offered help without expecting anything in return, how he looked at me as if I were something more than just the problematic sister of a cruel woman, all of this made me want to take the risk. Okay, why not? The words came out before I could reconsider, loaded with acceptance that was resigned and hopeful at the same time. They already ruined my night anyway. At least I'll eat well and in good company. Johan smiled, and it wasn't the sarcastic half-smile I'd already seen a few times, but a genuine smile that lit up his entire face, transforming the dangerous beauty into something almost devastating. Honest, I like that about you. The observation came accompanied by approval that warmed something in my chest. He guided me through hallways that clearly weren't accessible to the general public, climbing a narrow staircase that led to a private terrace at the top of the building, where a single table was set under a canopy of fairy lights that transformed the space into something out of an urban fairy tale. The view of New York stretched around us, millions of lights blinking in the darkness like earthbound stars, and the night air was cool enough to be comfortable without being cold. Johan pulled the chair out for me with old-fashioned chivalry that seemed natural to him, and when he sat on the other side of the small table, I realized we were close enough for our knees to almost touch under the glass surface. A waiter appeared silently, filling glasses with red wine that was probably more expensive than my weekly salary, and disappeared with the same discreet efficiency. "So, Sienna Ravel," Johan began, leaning back in his chair with that casual elegance that seemed to be an intrinsic part of his personality. "What do you do when you're not being attacked by vengeful twin sisters?" The question pulled a genuine laugh from me, the first of the day that didn't taste bitter with irony, and I found myself relaxing in his presence in a way that didn't make sense considering he was still essentially a stranger. "Art. I'm a curator at a gallery in Chelsea," I answered, taking a sip of the wine that was smooth and complex on my palate. "And you, besides owning expensive restaurants and sophisticated hotels, what do you do?" Johan picked up his own glass but didn't drink immediately, just held it while studying me with that intensity that was becoming familiar. "Family business? Import and export mainly." The answer was too vague to be completely honest, and he must have noticed my skepticism, because he added with a darker tone, "and other things you probably don't want to know the details of." My stomach tightened with the obvious implication, and I found myself leaning slightly forward, even knowing I should pull away. "Mafia?" The word came out as a whisper, loaded with curiosity and apprehension in equal measures. He didn't deny it, didn't look away, didn't try to soften the truth with polite lies. Smart. The confirmation came simple and direct. "Yes, Kalana family, and I'm the Don, the boss." Johan paused, setting his glass on the table and leaning forward so we were even closer. "Does that scare you? Make you want to run away and never look back?" It should scare me. All logic dictated that discovering my unexpected savior was literally a mafia boss should make me get up and leave immediately. But instead of fear, I felt only intense curiosity and something more dangerous I didn't want to name. "Should it scare me?" I countered, surprising myself with the courage. "You helped me when you didn't have to, protected me when I was a complete stranger, so why should I be afraid now?" Johan looked at me as if I were a complex puzzle he was trying to put together, and something that looked dangerously close to admiration shone in his gray eyes. "Because most people run as soon as they find out, and the ones who don't run usually want something, power or money, or protection." His voice had acquired a cynical edge, but you asked a different question. You asked if you should be afraid instead of just assuming you should. "And you helped me why?" I pressed, feeling like we were dancing around something important that neither of us was ready to fully name. Pure kindness? Or was there interest mixed in there? The honesty of the question made him smile again, but this time it was something darker, more intense. "Both." The admission came without hesitation. "I saw cruelty, and I hate it above all else, especially cruelty against people who don't deserve it, but also because you fascinated me since the moment you didn't cry despite the humiliation." He paused, eyes never leaving mine. "Silent strength is rare, and I want to get to know you better. Understand what makes you not bend even when the world pushes you." My heart was beating so hard I was sure he could hear it, and my breathing had become shallow in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the intensity of his complete attention, focused on me. Even knowing I have a psychopath twin sister who will probably show up again and cause more problems? I tried to inject lightness into the question, but my voice came out hoarse. Johan laughed, a low, dark sound that sent shivers down my spine. I love problems, especially the ones that come in the form of complicated women with vengeful sisters. He leaned even closer, close enough for me to count the dark lashes framing his eyes. And your sister? If she shows up again trying to sabotage you or use me somehow, I'll handle it personally while you just watch. The promise of fierce protection should make me pull back, should light alarms about domineering men in dangerous situations. But instead, I found myself leaning toward him too, drawn like a moth to a flame, even knowing I could get burned. Okay, let's get to know each other better then. My voice came out more confident than I felt, but slowly because I don't do Mafia normally, and you clearly don't do relationships considering the warning. And I don't do relationships normally, Johan admitted with honesty that seemed to cost him something. So we're both experimenting with new territory here, Sienna. The way he said my name, with that soft Italian accent on the vowels, made something melt inside me. Phone number now. It wasn't a request, it was a soft but definitive order, and I should have been irritated by the presumption, but instead I found myself grabbing my phone and handing it to him. Johan typed his own number and called me so I'd have his too, and the practical gesture was accompanied by a small smile that suggested satisfaction at securing a way to contact me. Tomorrow, dinner again, I'll pick you up at 7. Another order disguised as an invitation, and this time I couldn't let it pass without comment. You don't ask. You just order? I arched an eyebrow, testing the limits of this strange dynamic forming between us. Is that an occupational habit or just a naturally domineering personality? Johan leaned back with an expression that mixed amusement and something more intense. Occupation creates habits, but yes, I'm naturally like this. He paused, and then added with a slightly softer tone, so do you accept? Dinner tomorrow, 7 at night, I pick you up? The reformulation as a question made me smile victoriously. I accept, but learn to ask sometimes. Not everything in life responds well to orders. I was testing, provoking, seeing how far I could push before he pushed back. Noted. Johan agreed with surprising ease, and something in the way he looked at me suggested he liked being challenged, that my refusal to simply accept everything he said was part of what made me interesting. Now eat, because the chef prepared carbonara especially, and he'll be offended if we let it get cold. The dinner that followed was surprisingly easy, conversation flowing between us with a naturalness that shouldn't exist between two people who barely knew each other, and when we finally came down from the terrace 3 hours later, I realized I had laughed more that night than I had laughed in months. Johan walked me to a shiny black car that appeared like magic when we left the restaurant, and drove me to my apartment in Brooklyn, with the same silent protection he had shown all night. When the car stopped in front of my building, Johan got out and opened the door for me with chivalry that should seem old-fashioned, but just seemed seductive. Tomorrow, 7, he repeated, holding my hand for a moment that extended long enough to be significant. Sleep well, Sienna. And as I climbed the stairs to my apartment, still feeling the warmth of his hand in mine, I realized that for the first time in 5 years, I was looking forward to tomorrow, instead of dreading it. Maybe Johan has a very authoritative way of speaking, but he's also being very chivalrous with our protagonist. Chapter 3. First swap.
Something isn't right.
And Johan almost falls for it. I woke up the next morning with a strange feeling of lightness in my chest, as if something fundamental had changed the night before, and my body was processing the difference even before my conscious mind could fully name it. The sun came through the thin curtains, creating patterns of light on the wooden floor of my room, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel that crushing weight of loneliness that normally accompanied me from the moment I opened my eyes. My phone vibrated on the nightstand, and when I picked it up to check, I found a message from Johan sent at 6 in the morning. Just 3 simple words that made my stomach do an involuntary flip and my cheeks heat up in a ridiculous way considering I was alone in the room, thinking about you. There were no exaggerated romantic flourishes or elaborate attempts to seem disinterested, just raw and direct honesty that was so characteristic of him. And I found myself smiling at the phone screen like an idiotic teenager before responding with something equally simple. "Good morning to you too," I typed, and then put the phone aside, forcing myself not to stare at the screen waiting for an immediate response, as if my life depended on it. Breakfast was quick, toast with butter that I ate standing up while getting ready for another day at the gallery, and before leaving, I took a quick photo of my reflection in the hallway mirror. The dress was simple, dark blue that Abigail had said brought out my eyes, and my hair fell in natural curls that I had finally learned to accept instead of trying to tame into smooth submission. I posted the photo on Instagram with a casual caption about starting the week right, also adding a photo I had taken the night before of La Rosanera before everything collapsed into public humiliation, because the restaurant had been beautiful, even if the initial experience had been disastrous. I tagged the location without thinking much about it, just sharing a piece of my night that had ended surprisingly well, and left for work without imagining the consequences of that innocent post. On the other side of the city, in an expensive apartment in the Upper East Side that she could barely afford, but insisted on keeping to preserve appearances of success she didn't have, Scarlett Revelle obsessively scrolled through Instagram, looking for any crumb of information about the life of the sister she despised with poisonous passion. It was a sick morning ritual she performed almost every day, waking up and immediately checking Sienna's social media looking for evidence of happiness or success she could sabotage or destroy, feeding the envy that constantly burned through her veins like corrosive acid that never found relief. When she saw the new post, she almost dropped the coffee she was holding, her hands trembling with instant rage that boiled under her skin. 2 photos, one of La Rosa Nera with a caption about unexpected nights, and another of Sienna wearing a dress that Scarlett recognized as a gift from that damn Abigail, smiling at the camera with genuine happiness in green eyes that were identical to hers but completely different in essence. She met someone? The realization hit Scarlett like a punch to the stomach, and she zoomed in on the photos, desperately searching for more information, for any clue about what had happened the night before after she had left, leaving Sienna drenched in wine and publicly humiliated. She frantically checked the comments and found gold. A mutual acquaintance that Scarlett barely remembered from where had commented, "Saw you leaving the restaurant with that gorgeous man. Finally a good date?" And there was an attached photo, blurry and taken from afar, but recognizable, showing Sienna leaving La Rosa Nera, accompanied by a tall and absurdly well-dressed man who kept his hand protectively on her back. White fury exploded in Scarlett's vision, so intense she had to sit down before her legs gave out completely. On the same damn night I humiliated her in front of the entire restaurant, she met someone and left happy with him as if nothing had happened. As if my sabotage meant nothing, she saved the photo and zoomed in obsessively, studying every visible pixel of the man accompanying her sister. He was handsome in a dangerous and expensive way, with a posture that screamed power and money even through the low-quality image, and there was something in the way he looked at Sienna, even in profile, that made Scarlett's envy transform into something darker and more poisonous. She began investigating with the obsessive determination of someone who had years of practice spying on her sister's life, using questionable reverse image search techniques and systematic stalking through social media until finally finding a name when she discovered a similar photo posted by someone else who had been at the restaurant that night. Johan Kalana. The name meant nothing initially, but when Scarlett specifically searched for him, she almost knocked over her laptop with the discovery the screen revealed. Don of the Kalana Mafia family, billionaire, owner of restaurants and hotels and legitimate businesses scattered throughout New York, with connections that extended across the entire East Coast and probably beyond. This should be mine. The thought hammered in Scarlett's head with obsessive force, and she studied the photos of him available online with a hunger that had nothing to do with physical attraction and everything to do with pure greed. She doesn't deserve a man like that, power like that, money like that, connections like that. I deserve it. I've always deserved everything she has, everything our parents gave her instead of me, everything life hands her on a silver platter while I have to fight for scraps. The plan formed quickly, fueled by years of practice passing herself off as her sister and stealing pieces of her life whenever possible. They were identical twins, identical in physical appearance down to the last genetic detail, and Scarlett had become an expert at studying Sienna's mannerisms, the way she moved and spoke and dressed. If I dress right, behave similarly enough, wear the same kind of clothes she wears, I can easily fool this Johan long enough to seduce him, make him fall in love with me thinking I'm her, and then when he's completely hooked I reveal who I really am, and he won't be able to resist, because he'll already be too in love to care. Scarlett smiled at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, practicing softer and less calculating expressions that Sienna naturally had, studying the way her sister bit her lip when nervous, and how her eyes lit up when genuinely happy. She needed to get Johan's phone number, and that would be the hardest part, but she had questionable contacts who owed favors, and was willing to use all of them. It took 2 days of calls and promises and small bribes, but finally Scarlett got the number she needed through an acquaintance who worked at one of Johan's restaurants and had access to reservation information. She carefully studied the photos Sienna had posted in recent months, memorizing the style of clothing she preferred, the type of light makeup she used, even the perfume she had once mentioned liking in an old post. On the afternoon of the 3rd day after discovering about Johan, Scarlett sent a message from the new number she had bought specifically for this farce, typing carefully to sound like her sister. "Hi Johan, this is Sienna. I got your number from a friend who works at La Rosa Nera. Sorry I didn't respond before. Work was crazy. Can we meet tonight? She waited with racing heart, fingers drumming anxiously against the table surface, while the minutes dragged like hours, until finally the phone vibrated with a response. Sure, dinner at 7? I'll pick you up at the same place as before. Perfect, Scarlett thought with poisonous satisfaction, and began preparing meticulously to transform herself into her sister, applying each layer of disguise with surgical precision born from years of envy and obsessive observation. At 7 o'clock, sharp Johann stopped the familiar black car in front of the Upper East Side address he had received via text when he asked where he should pick up Sienna, and something in him already began sounding subtle alarms when he realized the building was completely different from what he would expect from an art curator who worked in Chelsea. He watched with eyes trained to catch every detail when a woman who looked identical to Sienna came out of the sophisticated building, dressed similarly to what the real Sienna would wear, hair loose over her shoulders in curls that tried to imitate her natural ones. But there was something in the posture that was already slightly wrong, a confidence too calculated where Sienna had hesitant and natural grace. Scarlett entered the car with a smile that tried to be warm, but came out predatory to eyes trained to recognize falseness, and Johann immediately noticed the perfume was completely wrong. Sienna smelled like something floral and soft, almost imperceptible, as if she were afraid of taking up too much space even with fragrance. But this woman wore something heavier and more obvious that invaded the closed space of the car almost aggressively. Hi, Johann. Ready. The voice was similar in tone, but the enthusiasm was exaggerated, too performative, without the genuine softness Sienna had when speaking. Johann just nodded, maintaining a neutral expression while mentally cataloging each subtle difference. Hi, let's go, he responded simply, and began driving toward the restaurant he had chosen for that night, already half suspecting something was fundamentally wrong, but without enough certainty to accuse yet. During the drive, she tried to make light conversation about work and weather, but there was something off in the way she touched his arm too frequently, as if trying to establish physical intimacy they hadn't yet naturally earned. Sienna had been careful with touch, almost shy in the way she accepted closeness, but this woman was aggressive in a way that raised red flags. The restaurant was authentic Italian, smaller and more intimate than La Rosanera, and Johann watched with growing attention as she examined the menu with eyes that seemed to be calculating prices instead of choosing food. Sienna had marveled at the culinary experience, had asked intelligent questions about ingredients and preparation, but this woman just pointed to the most expensive dish without hesitation. So, Dawn? Scarlett began as soon as the waiter walked away, leaning over the table so Johann had too clear a view of the neckline of her dress. Do you have a lot of power? A lot of money? The question came accompanied by a touch on his arm, fingers lingering too long against his shirt sleeve. Johann leaned back subtly, creating physical distance while studying her face, looking for some innocent explanation for the behavior so different. Enough to live comfortably. Why the question? His voice had cooled a few degrees, testing to see how she would react. Just curious. Scarlett laughed in a shrill way that made Johann internally cringe because Sienna laughed softly and almost shyly, as if afraid of being too loud. And, could you show me your world? The power? I'd love to intimately know everything about you and your business. The suggestion was too obvious, loaded with poorly disguised insinuation. Her hand landed on Johann's knee under the table, moving dangerously up his thigh, and he pulled away immediately as if he'd been burned, pushing the chair back a few inches and removing his leg from her reach. Definitive red flag. Sienna would never be so physically aggressive. Not so soon. Not with someone she barely knew. Sienna. Johann used the name deliberately, voice dropping to a dangerous tone while watching to see if she would react to the falseness of the identification. You're very different from last night when we had dinner together for the first time. Scarlett froze for a fraction of a second that would have been imperceptible to less trained eyes, and then improvised quickly with a smile that tried to be sweet. What do you mean different? I'm just more comfortable with you now. Relaxed because we already know each other better. More direct, yes. Johann agreed with no emotion in his voice. Yesterday you were reserved, intelligent, careful with every word you spoke and every movement you made. Today you're aggressive, obvious, interested in things the Sienna I met would never mention so soon. He leaned forward, gray eyes studying every micro-expression. Why the such drastic change? I already told you I'm just more comfortable, Scarlett insisted with a touch of irritation leaking through the mask of sweetness, and then made the mistake that confirmed absolutely everything for Johann. She leaned even closer and kissed his cheek possessively, marking territory with a gesture that was too intimate for where they should be in the relationship. Sienna would never do that. Not so soon. Not without hesitation or silent request for permission first. Johan knew with growing certainty now that he was dining with someone impersonating Sienna, but he still lacked absolute confirmation before he could openly accuse. The dinner continued tense, with Scarlett trying increasingly desperately to establish intimacy and seduction, while Johan became progressively more distant and cold, answering questions with monosyllables and avoiding any physical touch she tried to initiate. She talked about money 3 more times, about power twice, about wanting to see where he lived and know his world at least 5 times in different variations. When dessert was served and partially ignored by both for completely different reasons, Scarlett made the final move she believed would be victorious. "Johan, I'd love to see your house. Know where you live. Can we go there now? I want to be alone with you for real." Johan watched her for a moment too long, and then refused with a firmness that didn't accept debate. "Not today. It's too early for that." His voice had lost any fake warmth he had tried to maintain during dinner. "I'll take you home now. Where do you live exactly? What's the exact address?" Scarlett made the fatal mistake that confirmed everything absolutely. "Oh, you can drop me off at the corner of my building. I'll walk the rest of the way. You don't need to worry about the exact address." The lie was too obvious, transparent in its desperation. Sienna would have given the address without hesitation, trusting him enough to know where she lived exactly. But this woman didn't know her sister's address, or was afraid Johan would discover the truth if he took her there and saw the wrong building. Johan drove in icy silence to the corner she indicated in the Upper East Side, and watched through the rearview mirror as she got out of the car and quickly disappeared down a side street as if fleeing. As soon as she was out of sight, he grabbed his phone and called Michael with a voice carrying the cold fury that always preceded his most lethal decisions. "Michael, I need a complete investigation on Sienna Revell and Scarlett Revell, twin sisters." The order came sharp and definitive. "Exact addresses for both, complete history, side-by-side photos if possible. I need everything in the next 24 hours. Problem, boss?" Michael asked with the efficiency of someone accustomed to urgent requests without unnecessary explanations. "I think I had dinner with the wrong sister, with Scarlett impersonating Sienna trying to deceive and use me, and now I need absolute confirmation before deciding exactly how I'm going to make her pay for trying to manipulate me." Johan responded with determination cold as ice. "And Michael, when I have absolute certainty, I'll make sure she never tries something like this with anyone again." I spent that night completely oblivious to the drama unfolding, working late at the gallery preparing a new exhibition that would open the following week. And when I finally got home at 10 at night, I was too tired to check social media or messages beyond a quick response to Johan's text wishing me good night. I slept deeply and woke up the next day with no idea that Scarlett had had dinner with Johan impersonating me, not knowing he had almost fallen for the farce but been suspicious enough to investigate, not imagining that in the next few hours the truth would be revealed in a way that would change everything completely. Yikes, what's Johan gonna do with this twin information? Trouble's coming. Chapter 4, Discovery and Confirmation.
I'm not her.
I woke up Saturday morning with that strange lightness still in my chest, remnant of the week that had been surprisingly good since I'd met Johan in the middle of the spilled wine disaster. We had already had dinner together 3 times, conversations flowing with an ease that seemed impossible between 2 people who barely knew each other, and last night he had texted saying he'd pick me up at 7 for dinner again. I spent the entire day in a state of anxious anticipation, tidying the apartment even knowing he wouldn't come inside, changing clothes 4 times before finally deciding on the navy blue dress Abigail had given me, applying and reapplying makeup until I was satisfied with the natural result. At 6:45, I was already completely ready, sitting on the couch obsessively checking my phone, waiting for a message from him saying he was on his way. 7 o'clock came and went without any message. No call, absolutely nothing. I tried not to panic immediately, reasoning that maybe he was stuck in traffic or some work emergency had come up last minute. At 7:15, I sent a casual message asking if everything was okay, and when I didn't get a response in 5 minutes, the anxiety began transforming into something heavier in my stomach. At 7:30, I was pacing back and forth in the small apartment, imagining every possible scenario from car accident to him simply having lost interest and deciding to ghost me without having the courage to cancel directly. At 8, I had called 3 times, and all went straight to voicemail, and anger began replacing worry, because if he simply didn't want to see me anymore, he could at least have the decency to let me know, instead of leaving me waiting like an idiot. At 8:30, I finally accepted the humiliating truth that I'd been stood up, that Johan Kalana had invited me to dinner, and then simply didn't show up without explanation or excuse. And the tears I'd tried to hold back began falling as I took off the pretty dress and put on comfortable pajamas. I should have known it was too good to be true. Should have realized that men like him didn't genuinely get interested in women like me without some hidden motive. I spent the night watching bad movies on Netflix and eating ice cream straight from the container, refusing to check my phone because with each minute that passed without a message or call from him, the humiliation grew, and I didn't want to feed the pathetic hope that maybe he'd still call with a reasonable explanation. I slept late and badly, waking up several times during the night with that horrible feeling in my stomach that came from being rejected without even the dignity of clear rejection. That same Saturday morning, in a private room in one of the offices Johan maintained for less public business, Michael entered carrying a thick folder full of information he had collected throughout the night through legal and questionably illegal contacts scattered throughout the city. "Boss, complete report on Sienna Ravel and Scarlett Ravel as you requested." Michael placed the folder on the polished mahogany table and began organizing photos and documents with the efficiency of someone who had done this thousands of times. Sienna lives in Brooklyn Heights, modest rented apartment but in a good area, works as a curator at the Morrison Gallery in Chelsea for 3 years, reasonable salary but nothing extravagant. Johan picked up the photos of Sienna, studying each one with meticulous attention. He normally reserved for adversaries in dangerous negotiations, looking for every detail he could use to distinguish her from her sister with absolute certainty. There were photos of her leaving the gallery, walking through the neighborhood streets with a coffee cup in hand, entering the building where she lived, all taken discreetly by investigators who knew how to remain completely invisible. "And Scarlett?" Johan asked, without lifting his eyes from the images, mentally cataloging every aspect of Sienna's appearance from the way she held her purse to the way her hair fell naturally in curls over her shoulders. "Scarlett lives in the Upper East Side. Apartment she rents but is 3 months behind on payment according to our contacts in the building." Michael passed another set of photos. "Works freelance in graphic design but jobs are sporadic, inconsistent income. Apparently lives way above her means and constantly accumulates debt trying to keep up appearances." Johan placed the photos of the two sisters side by side, comparing millimetrically every aspect of physical appearance, looking for the subtle differences his instinct had picked up during the disastrous dinner the night before. At first glance, they were absolutely identical. Same wavy brown hair, same green eyes that seemed to change tone depending on the light, same delicate facial structure but with strength underneath. But when he studied more deeply, applying all his observation skills trained by years of work where a missed detail could mean death, he began to see the nuances that distinguished them in ways that went beyond shared genetics. "Here." Johan pointed to a photo of Sienna where she was holding coffee with her left hand, wrist completely visible above the coat sleeve. Small scar on the left wrist. Looks old, maybe from a burn or healed cut. He picked up a photo of Scarlett in the same position. She doesn't have the scar, skin completely smooth without any marks. Michael leaned in to verify up close, confirming the observation with an admiring nod. "Correct? Good catch, boss. Anything else?" "The hair." Johan continued his meticulous analysis, with a focus that made Michael understand why he had reached the position of Dawn before 35. "Sienna has more natural curls, more volume that seems unforced, cut slightly shorter at shoulder length. Scarlett straightens more, tries to control the curls with products. Length is at least a centimeter longer." He picked up more photos, studying facial expressions captured in casual moments. "And when she laughs, Sienna, the corner of her mouth rises first on the right side before the full smile appears. Scarlett laughs symmetrically, forced, as if performing happiness instead of genuinely feeling it." "You have an exceptional eye for detail, boss," Michael commented with genuine admiration he rarely showed. "I need to have it in this line of work. A missed detail can be the difference between life and death." Johan responded without emotion, but internally felt satisfaction for having trusted the instincts that had screamed alarms during the entire dinner. "Last night, when I had dinner with the woman who said she was Sienna, she didn't have a scar on her wrist. I noticed when she touched my arm for the 3rd time, and the perfume was completely wrong. Sienna uses something floral and soft, but this woman used something heavy and obvious. So confirmed, you had dinner with Scarlett pretending to be Sienna, trying to deceive you and probably use your connections and money." Michael summarized with obvious contempt leaking through his professional tone. "Exactly," Johan agreed with icy fury beginning to seep in. "And she tried to seduce me so aggressively and obviously it was almost insulting." He paused, processing something that only now clicked completely. "And Sienna, the real one, probably waited yesterday at 7 when I said I'd pick her up. I didn't show up because Scarlett showed up instead." You forgot you had plans with Sienna? Michael asked, confused. I didn't forget. The anger in Johan's voice increased a few degrees. Scarlett must have intercepted somehow, maybe sent a message from her number canceling on Sienna's behalf, or simply showed up at the address and I assumed it was her because they're identical, and I still didn't know the differences. He ran his hand through his hair with rare frustration. I felt like a complete idiot, and meanwhile Sienna waited, and I didn't show up. Didn't call. She must be thinking I stood her up without explanation. What are you going to do? Michael asked, already knowing a plan was forming in the boss's calculating mind. I'm going to call Sienna now, explain everything, and then we're going to set a trap to make sure Scarlett pays for trying to use me and sabotage her sister. Johan picked up the phone with cold determination. And Michael, when I expose Scarlett, it's going to be in a way that she never tries something like this with anyone again. Sunday morning arrived with rain beating against the windows of my apartment, and I woke up with eyes swollen from crying and a throbbing headache pulsing at my temples. I had finally blocked Johan's number at 3 a.m. after spending hours alternating between anger and sadness, deciding that if he didn't even have the decency to explain why he'd stood me up, then I wasn't going to be available for when he eventually decided he wanted to talk. I was making coffee when my phone rang with an unknown number, and I almost didn't answer because it was probably telemarketing or spam, but something made me accept the call in the last second before it went to voicemail. Hello? My voice came out hoarse from a badly slept night and crying. Sienna, it's Johan. I need to explain. His voice started, but I interrupted before he could finish the sentence, all the anger I'd been holding exploding at once. Explain what? I screamed into the phone without caring if the neighbors could hear through the thin walls. You stood me up yesterday, 7 p.m. I waited an hour like an idiot thinking you were stuck in traffic, or that some emergency had happened, and you didn't even call, didn't text, absolutely nothing. Silence on the other end of the line for seconds that seemed eternal, and then Johan's voice returned loaded with something between regret and anger that wasn't directed at me. Because I didn't stand you up, Sienna. Your sister showed up pretending to be you, and I didn't realize it until after because you're identical, and I was still learning the differences. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach, completely robbing the air from my lungs while my brain tried to process what he was saying. What? Was all I could whisper, the anger instantly evaporating to be replaced by growing horror. Scarlett, Johan confirmed with a voice that had cooled to a lethal tone. She impersonated you, must have sent a message from your number or showed up instead when I went to pick you up. And I fell for the initial farce because I didn't know you well enough yet to distinguish immediately. Silence fell while I processed. Memories of all the times Scarlett had done similar things over the years flooding my mind, and when I finally could speak, my voice was loaded with fury that went far beyond normal anger. Scarlett, she impersonated me, again, but this time it wasn't just stealing attention at a party or sabotaging a job interview. She tried to steal you. Yes, and tried to seduce me to get access to my money and connections, Johan explained with obvious contempt. But there were things wrong from the first moment. Small details that didn't match the Sienna I met. The perfume was completely different. You used something floral and soft, but she used something heavy. The scar on your wrist was missing. The way of speaking was more aggressive, more obvious, and she touched inappropriately, trying to establish intimacy that we hadn't naturally earned yet. Each word was like a knife being twisted in my chest, and tears began falling again. But this time they weren't from my own sadness, but from absolute rage against my sister who had crossed a line I didn't even know existed. And you believed her, at first? Thought it was me doing those things? I almost believed it in the beginning, because the physical resemblance is perfect. Johan admitted with honesty I appreciated even through the pain, but my instinct saved me. I kept noticing things that were wrong until I was sure enough to investigate. I spent the entire night with Michael collecting information about you two, studying photos, comparing every detail, and confirmed with absolute certainty that the woman I had dinner with wasn't you. How did you know for sure? I asked, needing to hear, needing to know he could really tell me apart from her. Scar on the wrist you have and she doesn't. Shorter hair with more natural curls. The way you laugh from the corner of your mouth first. Different perfume. Way of speaking softer and more hesitant instead of aggressive and obvious. Johan enumerated each difference with precision that made something warm spread in my chest, despite the horrible situation. And Sienna, I memorized everything about you in just a few meetings because you mattered to me, so recognizing that woman wasn't you was just a matter of paying attention. Sobs began coming out mixed with anger and something that was dangerously close to hope. She always does this, always steals and sabotages and destroys anything good I try to build, and I can never do anything because she always escapes or twists situations. Not this time. The promise came with determination, cold as ice. This time I'm going to set a trap. Next time she tries to make contact, and she will try because she thinks she completely fooled me, I pretend to fall for it. I invite her to my house saying I want privacy, and when she arrives, you'll be there too. Public exposure where she can't deny or escape. Interested? My heart accelerated with the possibility of finally making Scarlett face real consequences. Very interested. What do you need me to do? Stay away. Let her come to me thinking she's winning, and I'll set the stage for her complete destruction. Johann instructed with authority that should scare me, but only made me feel protected. Do you trust me to do this? Yes. I responded without hesitation, something fundamental having changed during this conversation. Strangely, I trust you completely. So do it. Expose her, and I'll love watching. I will. The promise came firm. And Sienna, after this is all over, after Scarlett understands she can't sabotage you or use me, we'll have our real dinner. You and me. No interference. No lies. Just getting to know each other for real. I'm looking forward to it. I responded honestly, and when the call ended, I realized I had gone from furious to hopeful in a matter of minutes, and for the first time in 27 years, I had someone fighting alongside me against Scarlett, instead of just watching her destroy me. Chapter 5. Trap set, and Scarlett falls for it.
It ends tonight.
The week following Johann's call was one of the strangest of my life, spending each day knowing that at some point, Scarlett would try to make contact again, and that when it happened, the trap would be set. I worked at the gallery trying to maintain focus on the pieces I was curating for the exhibition opening in 2 weeks, but my mind kept returning obsessively to the planned confrontation, imagining the expression on her face when she realized she'd been completely exposed. Johann sent me daily messages updating that Scarlett still hadn't tried to make contact, but that he was prepared and monitoring any communication that might come from her. The anticipation was slowly consuming me, each day without news, making the anxiety grow instead of diminish, and Abigail caught me several times looking at my phone with a distant expression instead of paying attention in important meetings. Thursday afternoon, while I was organizing catalogs in the small office at the back of the gallery, my phone vibrated with a message from Johann that made my heart race instantly. She took the bait. Friday at 8, my place. You come at 7 to position yourself before she arrives. I read the message 3 times in a row, the meaning finally penetrating through the fog of anxious anticipation, and responded with slightly trembling hands. I'll be there. Thank you for doing this. The response came almost immediately. You don't need to thank me. She tried to sabotage you and use me. That deserves consequences. I'll pick you up at 6:45 tomorrow. Scarlett Ravel was sitting in the expensive apartment she could barely afford, looking at her phone with poisonous satisfaction, after finally having gathered enough courage to send a message to Johann after an entire week of calculated silence. She had decided that waiting was a smart strategy, making him miss her instead of seeming desperate, and apparently the tactic had worked perfectly considering the response she'd received. She reread his message for the 5th time, savoring each word. Sure, dinner Friday at 8, my place. I want privacy this time. Address attached. Privacy at his house. That meant he was ready to take things beyond public dinners, that he had completely fallen for her farce of impersonating Sienna, and that access to his world, his money, his connections was finally within her reach. Victory burned sweet in her veins, feeding the familiar envy that always consumed her when she thought of her sister. Sienna is probably at home crying because Johann ghosted her after the first date, Scarlett thought with satisfied cruelty. She always got everything easy, but this time I'm going to steal something she won't even know she lost until it's too late. She spent all of Friday preparing meticulously, trying on 5 different dresses before choosing the tight red one that left little to the imagination, applying heavy makeup she thought was sophisticated but was just obvious, choosing heels so high she could barely walk, but that made her legs look endless. She studied her reflection in the mirror with satisfaction, seeing not Scarlett Ravel in debt, and desperate but the future Mrs. Kalana with access to unlimited power. At 5 to 8, she arrived at the luxurious building where Johann's penthouse was, checking her reflection one last time in the elevator mirror before ringing the doorbell with confidence that came from years of practice deceiving people by impersonating her sister. I had arrived at exactly 6:45 as Johann had asked, and he had guided me through the absurdly luxurious penthouse to an office adjacent to the main room, where I would have a clear view of everything, but wouldn't be immediately visible when Scarlett entered. My heart was beating so hard I was sure he could hear it, and my hands trembled with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation of finally seeing my sister face real consequences. Breathe. It's going to be okay. Johann held my face between his hands for a brief but comforting moment. Let me confront her first. Let her completely hang herself with her own lies, and then you come in, and she won't be able to deny or escape. I nodded without being able to form words, and he kissed my forehead softly before leaving the office, closing the door behind him. I stood there in the partial darkness, trying to regulate my breathing, hearing every sound amplified by the adrenaline running through my veins. At 8 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang, and through the crack of the slightly open door, I saw Johan cross the room to answer. When the door opened, revealing Scarlett in the too provocative red dress and too heavy makeup, something disgusting churned in my stomach because she was using my appearance, my face, to try to seduce someone I had started to genuinely care about. "Hi, Johan. We're finally alone for real." Her voice was too shrill, too enthusiastic, completely different from my natural tone, and I wondered how she thought she was being convincing. "Sienna, come in." Johan used my name deliberately, and I saw Scarlett smile victoriously without noticing the trap, entering the penthouse without waiting for an invitation, and passing so close to him their bodies almost touched. From my hiding place, I watched her walk through the room, touching everything she saw, fingers sliding over expensive furniture, while her eyes calculated values with greed she didn't even try to completely hide. "Your place is absolutely amazing. This must cost millions. How many millions?" The question came out disguised as innocent admiration, but was transparently about money. "A few," Johan responded with sarcasm that Scarlett didn't catch, maintaining physical distance while observing her every movement with cold eyes. "Wine?" "Yes. I'd love some." Scarlett accepted with exaggerated enthusiasm, taking the glass he offered and drinking a large gulp before approaching him in a calculatedly seductive way. I watched through the crack with growing nausea as she set the glass aside and touched his arm, fingers slowly moving up toward his shoulder with obvious intention. "Johan, I wanted to talk about us, about this strong connection I feel between us." Her voice had acquired a tone she probably thought was sexy, but just sounded desperate. "I want more. I want to take this forward. I want to be with you for real." She leaned in to kiss him, and I had to cover my mouth to keep from screaming, but Johan smoothly dodged, pushing her back a few steps with firm hands on her shoulders. "Interesting that you mentioned connection." His voice had cooled to a dangerous tone, because yesterday I spoke with Sienna, the real Sienna, and she told me something very curious about you. I saw the exact moment Scarlett froze, the seduction mask cracking slightly around the edges. "What? What are you talking about?" "I am Sienna." "What do you mean real?" "That you are Scarlett," Johan declared with cutting finality. "You impersonated your sister twice trying to deceive and use me, and you've always done this throughout her life, stealing and sabotaging everything she builds." He crossed his arms over his broad chest. "So, who are you really? Sienna? Or the envious little sister who never managed to be anything more than a poorly made copy?" Scarlett tried to maintain the farce, laughing nervously in a way that sounded fake even to me. "I am Sienna." "I don't know what you're talking about. You're confused, or..." That was my cue. I took one last deep breath and opened the office door, walking out into the main room with firm steps even though my legs trembled. "Liar." My voice cut through the air and I saw Scarlett turn so fast she almost lost her balance in the absurd heels. She is Scarlett, and I am Sienna, the real one. I walked until I was standing beside Johan, feeling the warmth of his presence giving me courage. "Hi, sis. Stealing my life again?" The expression on Scarlett's face transitioned from shock to horror, and then to pure panic, as she looked between us, processing that she had been completely deceived. "You? What are you doing here?" Her voice came out shrill, all pretense of being me completely abandoned. "I invited you both," Johan responded with cold satisfaction, "because I wanted a confrontation where neither of you could deny the truth." He turned completely to Scarlett with a threatening presence that made her instinctively back away. "And now, Scarlett, you're going to explain why you impersonate your sister to try to use me." Something broke inside Scarlett, and all the rage she had held for 27 years exploded at once in uncontrollable fury. "Because she doesn't deserve it. Nothing. Never deserved anything," she screamed with a voice loaded with distilled venom. "Always had everything. Parents' love, talent, good job, happiness, and now a powerful billionaire. All of that should be mine. I deserve it. Not her. Never her." The words should have hurt me, but instead I felt only pity mixed with anger, because looking at my sister screaming with her face distorted by envy, I realized she had become a prisoner of her own hatred. "You never deserved anything because merit is an appearance, Scarlett." My voice came out calm with strength that came from finally being on the right side with someone supporting me. "It's character. It's working hard. It's being a good person instead of trying to steal what others built. And you? You never had any of those qualities." Johan approached Scarlett with a presence that made even me shudder, despite knowing his anger wasn't directed at me, and she backed away until she was against the wall with eyes wide with genuine fear. "I completely agree." He spoke with a low voice that was more threatening than any scream. "And now you're going to get out of my house, my life, and Sienna's life, or I will make your existence impossible in ways you can't even begin to imagine." "Understood perfectly?" You can't threaten me! Scarlett tried to bluff with false courage that fooled no one. I'll go to the police. I'll tell everyone that I am the Dawn of the Kalana family. Johan interrupted her with absolute finality. I can do whatever I want, and guarantee consequences that go far beyond social humiliation if you try anything. He leaned closer, completely invading her personal space. Now get out, before I decide that conversation isn't enough and need to use more convincing methods to make you understand. Scarlett looked between us with pure hatred shining in green eyes that were identical to mine, but completely different in essence. And for a moment, I thought she was going to try to argue more or cause a bigger scene. But then she saw something in Johan's face, some promise of real violence if she didn't obey, and the false bravado completely crumbled. She grabbed the purse she'd dropped on the couch with hands trembling from anger and humiliation, and walked toward the door with forced dignity that didn't hide the absolute defeat. Before leaving, she turned to look at me one last time, with an expression that mixed hatred and something that looked painfully close to genuine hurt. I hate you. The words came out as a poisonous whisper. I've always hated you, since we were born, and Mom held you first, and this doesn't end here. Yes, it does. I responded with a firm voice even though my heart was racing. Because now you know there's someone protecting me, someone you can't manipulate or deceive, and if you try anything again, it'll be much worse than just exposure. The door closed behind her with a final sound that echoed through the silent penthouse, and for a moment, neither of us moved or spoke, just processing that the confrontation I had anticipated all week had finally happened, and Scarlett had been completely defeated. Then my legs began trembling so much I had to sit on the couch before they gave out completely, and the tears I'd held back during the entire confrontation began falling freely. Johan sat beside me immediately and pulled me into a hug that was protective and gentle at the same time, letting me cry against his chest while years of frustration and pain finally found safe release. It's over. She won't bother you again, I promise, he murmured against my hair, voice soft contrasting with the lethal coldness he'd used with Scarlett. Thank you. I managed to speak between sobs that shook my entire body, for believing me, for protecting me, for doing all this when you didn't have to, when you barely know me. Johan held my face between his large hands, gently forcing me to look at him through the tears that blurred my vision. I had to because you matter to me more than you should considering the ridiculously short time we've known each other. The admission came loaded with vulnerability I hadn't seen in him before, and now that Scarlett is out of the way finally, we can have our real dinner. No interference. No lies, no sabotage, just the two of us getting to know each other for real. Chapter 6, Burning Romance and Deep Connection.
Stay with me.
Always.
After the tears finally stopped falling and my breathing returned to normal rhythm, Johan gently guided me to the penthouse kitchen, a huge expanse of marble and stainless steel that looked like it had come straight out of an interior design magazine. He sat me on a high stool next to the center island while he washed his hands and began taking ingredients from the refrigerator with efficient movements that suggested real familiarity with that space. You cook? The surprise in my voice was too obvious, and Johan looked at me over his shoulder with that sarcastic half-smile I was starting to secretly love. Yes, I cook, and well actually. He placed tomatoes, cheese, eggs, and bacon on the counter. My mother taught me when I was a kid, before she died. The mention of his mother came accompanied by a shadow that passed quickly through his gray eyes. Carbonara, her recipe that she learned from her grandmother in Rome, passed down through generations, and now I'm the only one who still makes it the exact way she did. Something tightened in my chest at the unexpected vulnerability of the confession, and I found myself watching Johan with renewed attention as he worked, noticing the way his large but surprisingly delicate hands cracked eggs and separated yolks with practiced precision. How old were you when she died? I asked softly, not wanting to push but genuinely curious about the man behind the cold dawn mask. 8. The answer came short, loaded with old pain that time hadn't completely healed. Family rivals killed her to send a message to my father, and after that he raised me to be a weapon instead of a son, teaching that love was weakness and that trusting someone was an invitation for betrayal. Johan paused in the middle of chopping bacon, eyes fixed on the cutting board. For 27 years I believed that built walls so high no one could really get close, until a woman showed up drenched in wine refusing to cry and broke something inside me I didn't even know could be broken. My heart accelerated ridiculously at the obvious implication of who that woman was, and I swallowed hard, trying to process that Johan was telling me things he clearly didn't share with anyone, opening doors he probably kept locked for decades. Johan, my voice came out hoarse with emotion. You don't have to tell me all this if it hurts too much. I understand having parts of the past that are hard to revisit. I want you to know. He went back to cooking, throwing bacon into the hot pan where it immediately began to sizzle. I want you to understand why I am the way I am. why intimacy is hard for me, why trust doesn't come naturally. He turned to look at me directly. And I want you to decide with all the facts if you still want to try this between us, knowing it's going to be complicated sometimes. I got down from the stool and walked until I was beside him next to the stove, close enough to feel the heat emanating from both the pan and his body. I grew up with a twin sister who's hated me since the cradle and spent 27 years sabotaging every good moment of my life. I spoke honestly. Complicated is my normal, and I'd rather have real complicated with you than fake easy with anyone else. Johan looked at me for a moment that seemed suspended in time, something intense and vulnerable shining in his eyes, and then he went back to cooking in a silence that was comfortable instead of uncomfortable. I watched him prepare the pasta, boil water with salt, mix yolks with grated cheese, and the simple domesticity of the moment contrasted so strongly with the dangerous image he normally projected that it made me realize how much I still didn't know about Johan Colonna. 20 minutes later, we were sitting on the penthouse's private terrace, under fairy lights, that transformed the space into something magical. Plates of steaming carbonara in front of us, and red wine in glasses that reflected golden light. I tasted the first forkful and flavor exploded on my palate, creamy and rich and perfectly seasoned in a way that made my eyes widen. This is incredible. Seriously, better than any Italian restaurant I've been to in my entire life. I praised honestly, and the genuine smile that lit up Johan's face was so beautiful, I forgot to breathe for a second. Thank you. It's good to cook for someone who truly appreciates it instead of just eating out of social obligation. He took a sip of wine. And Sienna, you don't need to thank me for everything I did today. I wanted to do it because you've fascinated me since the moment I saw wine in your hair, and you refused to cry even when publicly humiliated. I stopped eating mid-forkful, heart racing at the intensity of the statement, and put my fork on the plate with slightly trembling hands. I feel something for you too, something strong that grew too fast to make logical sense. I admitted with vulnerability I normally hid. But Johan, your world, the Mafia, the constant danger that comes with it, I don't know if I belong in that kind of life, if I'm strong enough to deal with the realities that come with you. Johan stood up and walked to my side of the table, pulling my chair so we were facing each other with only inches separating our knees. You belong where I am. It's that simple. He held my hand between his, thumb tracing circles on my skin that sent shivers up my arm. Is my world dangerous? Yes, I won't lie about that. But I protect what's mine, always, with everything I have and am. He paused, eyes studying my face as if memorizing every detail. And Sienna, I want you as mine, not a possession I control, but an equal partner who chooses to be with me knowing exactly who and what I am. If you want that too. My breathing had become shallow with his proximity and the intensity of the declaration, and I found myself leaning forward until our foreheads almost touched. I want it, more than I should want it considering its complete madness. My voice came out whispered, but I need it to be slow. I need to know your world gradually, know you for real, not just the Don but Johan, the man who cooks carbonara and admits being afraid to trust. Something melted in his expression, the cold armor he normally kept in place cracking enough to let genuine vulnerability appear. Slow, I promise. At your pace, always. He brought my hand to his lips and kissed my fingers softly. And Sienna, no one has called me Johan the man in years. Everyone always says Don or boss or sir, but you see me beyond the role I play. His voice had become hoarse, and that scares me as much as it fascinates me, because you have the power to hurt me in ways no one else could. Good. I smiled through tears that had started forming again, but this time they were happy. Because you scare me too with all this intensity and power and focused attention, but I like being scared if it means feeling something real. I held his face between my hands, feeling the roughness of stubble against my palms. So we stay scared together? We try this even knowing it could go wrong in 1,000 different ways? Scared together sounds perfect. Johan agreed, and then closed the final distance between us and kissed me. The kiss started soft, almost hesitant, as if he were giving me a chance to pull back if I wanted. But when my lips moved against his, the hesitation evaporated completely. His hands moved to my waist, pulling me closer, while mine slid into his hair, and the kiss deepened, becoming urgent, and full of weeks of accumulated tension that finally had permission to escape. Johan kissed like he did everything else, with total intensity and absolute focus that made the world around us disappear completely, until only the sensation of his lips against mine existed, and his hands holding my body as if I were something precious and irreplaceable at the same time. My heart was beating so hard I was sure he could feel it against his chest, and when we finally separated to breathe, I was dizzy in a way that had nothing to do with the wine. Johan rested his forehead against mine, both of us breathing heavily, and his eyes when they opened were dark in a way that made my stomach contract. Stay tonight, with me. His voice had become even more hoarse. Not necessarily for intimacy, just stay. Sleep here in my arms because I want to wake up with you for the first time. and be sure this is real, and not a dream I'll wake up from and discover never happened. The raw vulnerability in the confession made something completely melt inside me, and I nodded before my brain could invent logical reasons why staying was a bad idea. Okay, I'll stay. I want that too. The smile that lit up his face was so genuine and happy he looked years younger, and he kissed me again softer this time before guiding me back inside the penthouse. He lent me his t-shirt to sleep in that was so big it almost reached my knees, and when I came out of the bathroom after washing my face, I found him already lying in the huge bed, wearing only pajama pants, and watching me with an expression that mixed desire and tenderness. I slid to his side hesitantly, never having shared a bed with someone in this intimate way, without expectation for something more. But Johan pulled me against his chest with an ease that made it seem like we'd done this 1,000 times before. The warmth of his body wrapped around mine completely, and the constant sound of his heartbeat against my ear was more comforting than any sleeping pill could be. Chapter 7. Scarlett Retaliates and Real Danger.
Wow. I needed you to know the truth.
The weeks following that night at Johan's penthouse were the happiest I'd experienced in years, maybe in my entire life if I was being completely honest with myself. Our relationship grew naturally but intensely, and Johan gradually introduced me to his world in ways that were both fascinating and terrifying. I watched business meetings where he negotiated completely legal import contracts with respectable businessmen, seeing the corporate side most people would never associate with the Mafia. But I also saw meetings in dark warehouses where conversations happened in Italian too fast for me to follow, where men with guns at their waists treated Johan with respect that bordered on reverent fear, and where I realized the danger was real and constant in ways movies never adequately captured. Johan in turn spent time at the gallery watching me work, asking intelligent questions about artists and techniques, even buying 2 expensive pieces for his private collection, in a way that made Abigail almost faint with happiness over the commission. He got to know my small but passionate world of art and culture, and surprisingly seemed genuinely interested instead of just tolerating it for my sake. We had dinner together at least 4 times a week, sometimes at sophisticated restaurants where everyone knew Johan and treated us like royalty, other times at his penthouse where we cooked together, and I learned Italian recipes passed down through generations of Colanas. I stayed more nights at his place than mine, waking up in his arms with sun coming through the huge windows, and slowly my apartment in Brooklyn Heights started feeling more like a clothes storage than a real home. We were happy in a way I didn't know was possible, finding a strange balance between my 2 worlds that shouldn't mix, but somehow worked. When Johan was holding my hand, and for entire weeks I almost completely forgot about Scarlett, almost believed the confrontation at the penthouse had been enough to make her give up permanently. I should have known it was a dangerous illusion. Scarlett Ravel hadn't forgotten, hadn't forgiven, and definitely hadn't given up. The humiliation burned constantly in her veins like a fire that refused to go out, fueled every time she saw photos of Sienna and Johan together at social events, or casual posts on social media showing happiness that should have been hers. 2 weeks after the exposure at the penthouse, sitting in the apartment she now absolutely couldn't afford, and facing imminent eviction, Scarlett decided that simply sabotaging her sister's happiness wasn't enough. She needed to destroy it completely, and if she couldn't have Johan Kalana, then Sienna couldn't either, even if it meant extreme methods she would have previously considered too far. She researched obsessively about rivals of the Kalana family, looking for someone who hated Johan enough to help her in revenge that went beyond simple social sabotage. The name Mordashov appeared repeatedly in articles about territorial wars between Mafia families, and Scarlett discovered the Russian family had lost lucrative business to Kalana in recent years, and was looking for any advantage to regain power. Getting contact with Mordashov took a week of attempts through questionable channels, but she was finally connected to a lieutenant who agreed to arrange a meeting. They met at a rundown bar on the Russian side of Brighton Beach, where Scarlett sat across from a large and scary man who smelled like vodka and violence. "So, little one, why should we be interested in what you have to say about Kalana?" The Russian accent was heavy, the words drawled in a threatening way. Scarlett swallowed her fear and forced confidence she didn't feel. "Johan Kalana has a weakness now, something you can exploit. A woman. My sister, actually. Sienna Ravel." She pushed a photo across the table. "If you grab her, he'll collapse. He'll give anything you ask to get her back." The Russian studied the photo with eyes that calculated value like a merchant appraising merchandise. "And you? What do you get from betraying your own sister? Him destroyed, her destroyed, both suffering like I suffered." Scarlett responded with poisonous honesty. "And money? You pay me for the information, enough for me to start over far from here. How much?" 50,000. The Russian laughed, a harsh sound that made Scarlett shudder. 10,000. Half now, and half when we confirm the information is good. Scarlett should have negotiated more but was too desperate. Deal. 3 weeks after the confrontation with Scarlett, on a normal Thursday that started with no sign it would be the worst day of my life, I stayed working late at the gallery finalizing details for the opening that would happen the next day. Abigail had gone home at 6, but I wanted to make sure every piece was perfectly positioned, every descriptive plaque impeccably written. At 9, I finally locked the gallery and went out to the dark Chelsea street, searching in my purse for my keys while walking toward the subway. The street was strangely empty for a Thursday night, and something in the back of my mind started screaming warnings I stupidly ignored. The black van stopped beside me so fast I didn't have time to react before the side door opened and strong hands grabbed me, pulling me inside while I screamed at the top of my lungs. I tried to fight, kicking and scratching anything I could reach, but there were 3 large men, and I was a 120-pound woman with no combat training. A cloth with a strong chemical smell was pressed against my face, and the world started darkening at the edges despite fighting unconsciousness with everything I had. My last conscious thought was of Johan, hoping somehow he'd know something had gone wrong, and then everything went completely black. Johan was in a business meeting when he received the video, phone vibrating insistently in his pocket. Until irritated, he grabbed it to turn it off. But when he saw it was a video file from an unknown number, something cold settled in the pit of his stomach, instinct trained by years of dangerous work screaming that something was fundamentally wrong. He hit play, and the world stopped completely when he saw Sienna on the screen, tied to a chair in a windowless room, gagged with cloth that didn't completely hide the terror in her green eyes. There was a purple bruise forming on her cheek as if someone had hit her, and her hands tied behind her back were at an angle that suggested pain in her shoulders. Don Colonna, a voice with a heavy Russian accent, spoke off camera. "We have your weakness, your pretty little woman. Want her back in one piece? South Territories all to us, and 10 million in clean money. You have 24 hours. Or she dies slow and painful, and we send you pieces." The video ended, and fury Johan hadn't felt in years exploded through him with a force that made everyone in the room instinctively back away. "Everyone out now!" The shout echoed through the conference room, and businessmen and associates fled as if escaping a dangerous animal. Michael appeared in seconds, always nearby when Johan needed him. "Boss, all the men, now, armed and ready for war." Johan was already calling the tech team. "Trace this video, find the location, and mobilize every resource we have, because we're going to destroy Mordashov and anyone who touched her." "Mordashov took Sienna," Michael confirmed, already typing orders on his own phone. "Yes, and when I find out who gave them information about her, death will be slow enough that they'll beg for the end," Johan promised with lethal coldness. "And Michael? It was Scarlett, I'm sure. She's the only one who'd hate Sienna enough to do this. 2 birds, 1 stone then. We save Sienna and destroy Scarlett permanently." Michael agreed. "Let's go." I woke up with throbbing pain in my head and metallic taste of blood in my mouth, memory returning in confused fragments until I remembered the van and the men and the chemical cloth. Ice-cold panic hit me when I realized I was tied to a chair in a windowless room, wrists hurting behind my back and shoulders screaming from being held in an unnatural position for a prolonged time. I forced my brain to focus through the fear, watching guards who were talking in Russian near the door, mentally cataloging the room looking for anything I could use. The rope on my wrists was tight but not impossible, and I started working discreetly trying to loosen it without drawing attention. One of the guards noticed I'd woken up and approached with a smile that made my stomach turn. "Awake finally, little one. Quiet, or I hurt you more." He pointed to my cheek where presumably was the bruise I could feel throbbing. "Try it." I spat at him with courage, born from pure rage, and his hand flew to hit me again, but stopped mid-motion when the other guard's voice shouted something in Russian. "Feisty. Dawn likes women with fire," he laughed unpleasantly. "Too bad it won't last long. Boss Mordashov doesn't usually return hostages alive even when ransom is paid." Before I could respond, a massive explosion shook the entire building, making dust fall from the ceiling, and then screams and gunshots started echoing from outside the room. The guards grabbed weapons and ran to the door, leaving me alone for a precious moment I used to work desperately on the ropes. The door exploded in splintered wood, and Johan entered like a force of nature, gun in each hand, an absolute fury on his face as he shot the guards with lethal precision. His men flooded the room behind him, and in seconds, what had been my prison became a complete war zone. Johan found me in the middle of the chaos and cut the ropes with a knife that appeared from nowhere, hands anxiously checking if I was hurt beyond the obvious. "Are you okay?" His voice was hoarse with barely contained emotion. "I am now." I threw my arms around him, ignoring the pain in my shoulders, and he hugged me so tight I could barely breathe, but I didn't care one bit. "I'm sorry for everything. I should have protected you better." Johan kissed my forehead, my hair, any part he could reach. "You came. That's what matters." I held his face. "And Johan?" It was Scarlet. I heard the guards talking. She gave Mordashov information about me in exchange for money. Fury crossed his face. I know, and she's going to pay in ways that will make what we did before look merciful. That was one of the most sinister threats I've ever seen. Chapter 8. Final Confrontation and Different Ending.
I choose us.
3 days after the violent rescue that left Mordashov's warehouse in flames and half a dozen Russians dead, Johann took me to an isolated property on the outskirts of New York that he maintained for business requiring absolute privacy. My heart was racing as we descended stairs leading to a converted basement, knowing exactly who we would find there. Scarlet was sitting in a chair in the center of the windowless room, wrists tied behind her back and ankles secured to the chair legs. But unlike how I had been days before, there were no marks of violence on her. Johann had made it clear she wouldn't be physically hurt despite what she'd done, and part of me admired that restraint. Even understanding it was more for me than for her. When she saw me coming down the last steps beside Johann, pure hatred exploded in her green eyes, so intense I could almost feel the heat burning through the space between us. You, the word came out like poisonous spit. Of course you'd come. Always get what you want. Always the perfect victim who needs to be saved. Johann positioned himself between us before I could respond, presence threatening, even without making any aggressive movement. Scarlet, Ravel, you handed over your own sister to Mordashov in exchange for $10,000, causing a kidnapping that almost resulted in her death. His voice was cold as ice, each word enunciated with surgical precision. Explain why anyone would do something so despicable to their own family. Because she didn't deserve it. Scarlet exploded with fury she'd held for 27 years, fighting against the ropes uselessly. Nothing. Never deserved anything. Always had everything I wanted. Parents' love before they died. Talent, good job, happiness, and now a powerful billionaire who protects her like she's something precious. Tears of rage began falling down her face. All of that should be mine. I deserve it. I always deserved more than her, but no one ever saw that. I took a step forward, placing my hand on Johann's arm, feeling tense muscles relax slightly under my touch. You're right about one thing, Scarlet. My voice came out calmer than I expected, considering the anger still burning in my chest. Our parents loved me more, but not because I was better or more deserving. It was because I loved them back while you were always cold and calculating even as a child. Liar! Scarlet screamed, but there was something broken in her voice now. It's not a lie, and you know it. I continued with growing firmness. Merit isn't appearance or shared genetics. It's character. It's kindness. It's building instead of destroying. And you never had those qualities, Scarlet. Never even tried to develop them, because you were too busy with envy you chose to feed instead of overcome. Heavy silence fell over the room, only Scarlet's sobs breaking the quiet. And for the first time since entering, she looked not furious, but completely defeated. I hate you. The words came out weak now, without the venom from before. I hate you for existing, for being everything I wanted to be and never could. I know you hate me. I always knew. I took a deep breath, feeling something loosen inside me. And Scarlet, I forgive you for everything, not because you deserve forgiveness, but because I deserve the peace of not carrying that weight anymore. I paused, letting the words penetrate. But forgiving doesn't mean forgetting or allowing you to keep hurting me, and Johann will decide what's fair as consequences. Johann looked at me with something close to admiration in his eyes before returning attention to Scarlet. Justice by the Mafia would be death, slow and painful for betrayal at this level. He let the words hang in the air loaded with promise of violence, but Sienna doesn't want blood on her hands, doesn't want your death remaining on her conscience. So I'm offering an alternative. Scarlet lifted her head, desperate hope appearing through the despair. What alternative? You leave the country today. Fake passport with new identity my contacts will provide. Start a new life away from New York and away from Sienna. Forever, Johann enumerated coldly. Or evidence of your involvement with Mordashov goes to the police, along with proof of all the other sabotages and frauds you committed over the years, and you spend the next 20 years in prison. Choose now. The choice was obvious, and Scarlet knew it when she nodded defeated. New identity. I accept to leave and never come back. Good. Johann signaled, and Michael appeared from the shadows, cutting the ropes. Michael takes you to the airport. Passport and documents are ready, and you catch a flight to Argentina in 3 hours. He leaned closer, voice lowering to a threatening whisper. And Scarlet, if you come back, if you try to contact Sienna in any way, if I discover you're causing problems even from the other side of the world, I end this personally in ways that will make you beg for a quick death. Understood perfectly. Understood, Scarlet whispered, looking at me one last time with an expression that mixed hatred and something that looked painfully close to regret. "Goodbye, Sienna. Goodbye, Scarlett," I responded, and we watched Michael guide her up the stairs until they disappeared completely. Silence fell over the now empty basement, loaded with the weight of 27 years of conflict finally coming to a definitive end. Johan pulled me into his arms, and I stood there absorbing the warmth and security of his presence, while processing that Scarlett had really gone, that for the first time in my life, I was free from her poisonous shadow. "Thank you," I murmured against his chest, "for showing mercy when she didn't deserve it, for doing this for me. I'd give you anything you asked for." Johan held my face, making me look at him. "And Sienna, about us, about everything we went through together in the last few weeks. Kidnapping, danger, exposure to my violent world." He paused, vulnerability appearing in his gray eyes. "Do you still want this? Life with me knowing there will always be risks?" "Yes," I responded without hesitation. Because life with you is worth any danger, and you make me feel seen in ways no one ever has." Something changed in his expression, determination mixed with nervousness I'd never seen before, and then, to my absolute shock, Johan knelt in front of me, taking a small velvet box from the inside pocket of his suit. "Then marry me." It wasn't a question, but an affirmation loaded with hope. "Not because you should, or because you need protection, but because I can't imagine life without you, and I want everything, Sienna. Life together, family, future, even knowing it'll be chaotic and dangerous sometimes, but it will be ours. Will you?" Tears fell freely down my face as I looked at the ring in the box, a simple but perfect diamond that shone under the basement's dim light. "Yes!" The word came out between happy sobs. "Always yes, to everything with you." Johan slid the ring on my finger and pulled me into a kiss that was a promise of everything to come. And there in that basement where Scarlett had been banished from my life forever, we started the next chapter truly free from all past weight. 3 years later, Tuscany, Italy. The old villa Johan had bought and renovated was in the heart of Tuscany, surrounded by vineyards that stretched to the horizon in green waves under the Italian sun. I watched from the terrace as Johan ran after Lucia, our 2-year-old daughter with dark curls she'd inherited from him and green eyes that were completely mine, while she laughed with the complete abandon only children can manage. "Slow down, Tesoro." Johan picked her up in his arms, spinning until she screamed with joy. "Daddy! Again!" Lucia demanded with authority she'd definitely inherited from him. "You spoil her completely," I called from the terrace, hand resting on my 6-month pregnant belly. Johan walked to me with Lucia still in his arms, kissing me tenderly before touching my belly with reverence. "I spoil all of you, and I won't apologize for it." His eyes shone with happiness that completely transformed the cold man he'd been 3 years before. Leaving the Mafia had been the hardest decision Johan had ever made, passing leadership to Michael and choosing a quiet life growing grapes and making wine instead of building a criminal empire. But looking at him now, holding our daughter and looking at me carrying our second child, I knew it had been the right choice. "Any regrets?" I asked softly. "Zero," Johan responded with absolute conviction. "Power and money are worth nothing compared to this. To you all, to real peace finally." He kissed Lucia on the cheek. "This is the life I always wanted but never thought I deserved." "And Scarlett?" The question came out before I could stop it. "Have you heard anything?" "No, she's somewhere far away living her life." Johan paused. "I hope she found peace too, even after everything." On the other side of the world, in a small apartment in Buenos Aires, Scarlett Ravel, now Maria Santos according to fake documents, looked at her laptop with an obsession that had never diminished in those 3 years. She had found their address through a private investigator paid with money she'd saved working at a local cafe, and now studied photos of the villa in Tuscany with renewed envy. "Did you find them?" a voice behind her asked in Spanish with a Russian accent, and she turned to see Dmitri, the man she'd met 6 months before, and who had revealed himself to be from the Volkov family, longtime rivals of the Mordashov, and by extension enemies of anyone associated with Kalana. "I found them," Scarlett confirmed, a vengeful smile curving her lips, living happily in Italy as if nothing happened, as if she didn't steal the life that should have been mine. Dmitri leaned over her shoulder, studying the photos with calculated interest. "And what do you want to do about it?" Scarlett looked at him, seeing opportunity forming, and asked with a voice loaded with intention. "Want to help destroy a former Don who made your rivals lose territory?" The screen darkened with that question hanging in the air, uncertain fate waiting to be decided in some distant future, leaving open the possibility that Sienna and Johan's story perhaps hadn't ended completely after all. Final reflection. This transcends romance, and dives deeply into the psychology of envy, recognition, and redemption. Scarlett represents the shadow we all carry, that part that compares, that resents, that believes it deserves more than it has. Her tragedy wasn't being born Sienna's twin, but choosing to feed envy instead of cultivating her own identity. The dynamic between the sisters illustrates a crucial psychological truth. Genuine merit doesn't come from appearance or circumstance, but from character built through daily choices. Sienna suffered constant sabotage, but maintained integrity while Scarlet became a prisoner of her own hatred, proving that envy destroys the one who carries it more than its target. Johann symbolizes love that truly sees. He memorized subtle differences between identical twins because he paid genuine attention. A powerful metaphor for authentic relationships where we're seen beyond social masks. His transformation from cold Don to loving father demonstrates that vulnerability isn't weakness, but the courage to choose connection over control. Sienna's forgiveness wasn't for Scarlet, but for herself. A profound lesson about how carrying resentment imprisons us more than it frees us. She chose her own peace over justified revenge, breaking the toxic cycle that could have been perpetuated. The story seemingly ended, but a part 2 might be coming. Just let me know down in the comments if you want a continuation. And if you want to see another love story, click on the video appearing now on your screen.